Welcome to the podcast Encrypted Minds, a podcast about entrepreneurs in the cybersecurity space. And today, special guest Stefan Farr of Identity Plus. We're going to discuss the trends and topics in the cybersecurity, especially focusing on identity tools like the offering of Stefan. Also, the rise of AI during the conversation, and I guess, during the preparation, Stefan, I really enjoyed all your point of views, and I'm already using some of the metaphors already. So I'm really happy that you're here. Stefan, can you introduce yourself somewhat deeper?
Hi, Edwin. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm pleased to be here and very excited about the conversation. I think this is a very hot topic nowadays, and I very much like it. I mean,
Very good.
it's to my
So,
heart.
Stefan, thanks. So, Stefan, something about your background, because you have multiple roles currently. Can you explain how your day-to-days look like?
Yes. So I guess my background is quite long. It's been in tech ever since the beginning. I started programming very early age, earlier than high school, basically, and just kept in the field ever since then. Went into university studying industrial automation and robotics. I have a major and a master's in robotics, mobile robot communications. I then transitioned into development. Early on, pretty much working with the internet ever since it became mainstream. Developing internet-facing applications, network-facing applications. I really always liked the communication aspect of things. And then gradually I started becoming more and more interested in cybersecurity, I guess because everything that I was doing was involving some aspects of cybersecurity, even though back at the time it wasn't that trendy, to be absolutely fair. It was
About what time? What time frame are we talking about?
even 10 years ago, it
10 years.
wasn't. Even 10 years ago, it wasn't this trendy. It was starting becoming more important, but like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, cybersecurity was really just a niche of
Yes.
some hackers hacking some telco and becoming famous because the FBI caught them, or
Yes.
defacing NASA site, or things like that. I mean, those were the early days of cybersecurity. Now, I guess cybercrime has become very much a business, and cybersecurity is very much a business itself,
Yes.
trying to kind of like compensate for that that trend, right? And so that's how I got into cybersecurity. I've always been kind of like a mix of my job has been a mix between cybersecurity and development, mostly developing things for cybersecurity. Not only development, but also architectures, infrastructures, trying to make things better strategically, not only tactically. I think cybersecurity, it's very important, that strategic aspect. It's a war, basically, and you strategy is everything. That it's going to be the deciding factor whether you win or lose. That's just it. It's not the weapons. I think the weapons are shared kind of like equally among adversaries. So you don't really get an advantage from the tools that you use, right?
What do you mean with it?
Uh, so
No,
basically,
the different
it's
tools you say. Yeah.
not different tools. That's what I mean. I mean, I think the tool set that cyber criminals have are matching the tools that cyber defenders have, right? Companies
Yes.
have. So you can't really get a significant amount of advantage from the tool set that you have, sort of
Ah,
like your weapons, yeah, right? That you fight against. On the contrary, I think, but probably we'll get into that subject a little later on. Criminals actually have a terrain advantage here.
yeah. Yeah. I see. I see what you mean. Before you continue, you mean 10 years ago, cybersecurity was like a niche, or 15 years ago. It is growing more importantly, and now you see networking and cybersecurity are converging to one because it's essential for your development. Then the different tool sets by the attackers and the defenders are the same, but our regulators are also putting effort in setting up frameworks about security. Is this in different are we having a level playing field against the attackers and the defenders? Because the defenders needs to take into account that there are certain regulations, while the attackers don't.
We, so, yeah, I guess we actually have a massively uneven field. So if you want, this is a very much an asymmetric battlefield.
Yes.
Attackers have a much greater advantage that anyone can actually imagine, and that's because it's not only because of the regulator; it's because of how things are set up. Like, think about it like this: attackers are always private, right? You don't know them. Companies are public, so you already have a discovery advantage on the attacker side. Attackers can see, defenders cannot see. Then attackers need only find one little hole in your system, whereas
Yes.
you have to defend an entire hole. I mean, an entire surface of attack. So your resource allocation is enormously bigger compared to the attackers. I mean, the attacker can do damage with tiny amount of resources, whereas you need a huge amount of resources in order to defend against them.
Yes.
That's another one. The other one, for example, about 80% of every software is it's open source code, basically. So chances are that if somebody discovers a vulnerability in an open source code somewhere else, that's only also applicable to you. So basically, the attacker has to invest zero energy in finding the vulnerability on your site in order to attack you, whereas you don't even know that that vulnerability exists. So there's absolute massive disadvantage on the part of services and companies that are trying to defend themselves. And another one is, for example, if the attack is unsuccessful, right, then
Yes.
the attacker just goes and tries again. I mean, there's no penalty to the attackers. Attackers are almost never caught. Whereas if the attack is successful, then the companies suffer consequences. So even in the dynamics of the development of the action, right, the crime
Yes.
itself, there is disadvantage because the field is not leveled. We're not
No.
playing kind of like the boxers in the ring. One of the
No.
boxers is kind of like, I don't know, cloaked and you don't know where it is, whereas the other one is just like openly there in the field and just getting punches. And
This is exactly what I mean. I like this metaphor already. I'm going to use this one as well, Stefan. This is a
so
nice one.
so that's how it is. I mean,
Yeah.
and that's I think this is something that strategically has never been closed in cybersecurity. I don't think this has to be like that. We don't have to have this in reality. I think the way that interaction happens in cyberspace is fundamentally different from the way interaction happens in the real world, and we never really understood as an industry how that
Yes.
works, and we never really designed things around this, and especially we haven't really designed security around this. So that's a problem.
That,
That's what creates the problem.
that creates. Is this one of the reasons you decided to start Identity Plus? Because you recognize these kind of issues and you saw a solution. Can you tell me a
Yes.
little bit about this, the background of your company?
Yes. So I think it's an interesting story, actually, because essentially I started a company. I had to do a presentation at a conference, and somebody asked me like to speak about something, right? Just like openly. And so I wasn't sure what to speak of because at that moment in time I was a little bit disappointed with cybersecurity. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And so it really didn't really feel that I can boast about any achievements in cybersecurity or talk about like highly about anything. So I started talking about something of what it would be like if, right? And so that what it would be like if turned actually into Identity Plus because it was a strategy about reversing how we do cybersecurity. I mean, cybersecurity right now, it's mostly a defense-based mechanism.
Yes.
We mostly just defend against attacks. And if you think about it, that's not really security. the very definition of security is being away from harm, right? That means you don't have to defend yourself.
Yeah.
So when you are secure, you don't have to defend yourself. Whereas cybersecurity is all about defending yourself. So in cybersecurity, it's kind of like being in a battlefield. You're not secure, but you're defending yourself and you're dodging attacks. And as long as you're dodging attacks, you're sort of like safe, right? In a way. But as soon as you stop, you're done. And that's what cybersecurity is. And that's because the way we do cybersecurity is we essentially we accept everybody in, and then we try to differentiate between who's doing what, because we can't see them. This is like the very, very different nature of cyberspace. We think we see things, but we don't really. We think we see attacks, but we don't really see attacks, because it's kind of like, imagine it like this. You're in the dark and somebody throws a rock at your head, right? You don't see the rock. You don't see the rock until it hits your head. And that's exactly how cybersecurity works. The moment you see an attack is the moment when it's hitting you. You don't see it kind of like coming towards you, right? You never see that. And that's fundamentally different from cyberspace from reality to cyberspace. And because we're doing things like that, allowing everybody in, then trying to detect those vulnerabilities, and then trying to figure out ways into creating some kind of like bulletproof helmet, right? To preventing the damage, we're not preventing the attack, right?
Yes.
Because we do it like that, it creates this massive disadvantage. It's not a security. Security is really happens only in two ways in reality. There's two types of security. It's perimeter security. And by perimeter security, I mean not necessarily that you have a wall, but it's perimeter security is when the attacker, you have vulnerabilities, but the attacker cannot exploit them because of something. It's either too far away from you, or you have a wall in between you, or something, right? So you have a sort of like a barrier, either natural or artificial, around those vulnerabilities that they cannot be exploited. This is one of the types of security. And the other type of security is really accountability. That means you have vulnerabilities. Your opponent can exploit those vulnerabilities because there's no barrier between you. But if that opponent does, he might suffer consequences, right? And that's kind of like stopping them from doing anything to you. That's accountability. That's the other type of security. There is no other type of security. Everything else is basically defense, or risk management, or vulnerability management, or everything but security, right? And so perimeter security is essentially the concept behind Identity Plus is perimeter and accountability. And the way you achieve that in digital space is by identity. So essentially, identity becomes the perimeter, and you have accountability because you have attribution for every action. And if identity is the perimeter, then if you don't have identity, you cannot connect. If you have identity, then your actions can be attributed back to you, and you're accountable for your actions. And that doesn't necessarily have to be kind of like a violation of personal information. On the contrary, I think this can be done much, much better. So that's essentially what Identity Plus is about. So we don't rely on personal information to do that. We rely on device identities, and we do that with standard internet protocols using mutual TLS, which is essentially an integral part of the PKI ecosystem that already exists in the market, like the transport layer security. But it's a component that has never been used because, or not at scale at least. It's never been used at scale because of the way that the certificate distribution mechanism works. It has never been feasible on the client side.
I see what you mean, but the weird thing is that if you explain it like this, you combine parameter security with accountability, it seems so almost common sense to solve a couple of issues. But you are also, we are in the market, we have big identity players, Why is it, what is different about the Identity Plus compared to the bigger players in the market? Or is it something they can copy and use in their offering as well?
So I guess there's an architectural difference. So
Okay.
what the problem here is that cybersecurity is basically stuck. It has been stuck for quite a long while. To be absolutely fair, there hasn't been a leap innovation in cybersecurity since the 1990s, when TLS and PKI and all of these went mainstream, right?
Yes.
Ever since then, so I'd emphasize leap innovation, because there has been incremental innovations, right? But those incremental innovations have been done on architectures and technologies that already existed back then,
Yes.
and they just cannot raise the bar to what is needed today in the market. And that's because the rest of the industry has went through and happily went through several leap innovations, right? I mean, right after 1990s, we had a SaaS revolution, right? The applications that we were using on our desktops in the perimeter of our houses and businesses went outside of that perimeter onto the internet, right? And then later on, we had a mobile revolution, right? So it's not only that the applications went outside of the internet, the device that we're using it from, right, went outside in the world. It became mobile. It can access it from anywhere, right? And then soon after that, we had a cloud revolution, right? Because when essentially not only the software and not only the user went outside the perimeter, we also moved the infrastructure out of the perimeter, right? Like the infrastructure that the SaaS software is running on is no longer in data centers, in the secure data centers. It's an softly secured data center, which is a virtual cloud, right?
Yes.
And then now we are going through the AI revolution, which it's not only changing how we're using things, but it's changing who is using things. Like you, the person, are no longer the main actor here, or in the future you won't be. It's going to be a delegation to an AI agent,
Yes.
right? Who's going to do things on behalf of you. The industry is not ready to accept AI agents, right? A lot of the security mechanisms that we have were built upon authentication of username and password, which is a technology invented in the 1970s. It's a 70-year-old technology.
Oh, really? 1970 already?
Yeah. Yes, it was used in the mainframes and back in those days. It's archaic, right? And we improved on that, right? We added two-factor authentication. We added customer verification, KYC, what we call liveness checks, right? All of these mechanisms to strengthen the identity of the individual using those credentials. The problem is that AI is not doing two-factor because it can't answer an SMS or a FIDO key or use anything, right? 2FA. You cannot do liveness checks because it's not alive. It's not even you. So it would be, if the bot were to do liveness check, that would mean it has to have your biometrics, which would be a terrible idea to do liveness checks on your behalf, right? So all of those technologies that were like incremental technologies that were added to that archaic architecture are kind of like now becoming totally obsolete. Like they're not even, they're irrelevant. They no longer work, right? And so you can see how the industry is moving outside, right? Like outside of the umbrella of cybersecurity and just getting the storm.
Now, before we just dive into the AI revolution, if I may compare it to the other revolutions you just mentioned, like the mobile revolution and the SaaS revolution, it's changed the entire security paradigm from a fortress, everything inside, to outside. Is there a way that we also became lazy about cybersecurity because everything is outsourced, that we tend to accept that the cybersecurity is also outsourced to the suppliers of the SaaS services we consume? How do
So
you see
that's a
this?
very complex question, and I think it has to do with human nature. So I'll go way back,
Yeah.
right? And I don't think it's wrong to say that we outsource it to the SaaS providers. And in fact, SaaS providers are outsourcing it to cybersecurity providers. And I think all of that is actually normal. And the reason behind that is humans have really evolved to exist in security, right? We don't operate as a species in an
No.
insecure environment, right? We don't have eyes on our temples, right,
Yeah.
to see incoming threat and run away. So it gives us the advantage to run away. We are very much different. So we build secure environments, and then we exist and live in those secure environments without worry, right? We are growing children, which are probably one of the most vulnerable creatures in the world for
Yeah.
the longest period of their existence in existence, right? And all of this process requires tremendous amount of security. We cannot be vulnerable, right? And because of that, we evolved to create a secure environment and then exist in that secure environment without actually having to worry about it. And for a long time in the human history, right, we lived in communities, and wilderness around us was no longer a problem because we could defend ourselves. We had fire, we had fences, we had all that stuff. But in modern world, right, humans became the enemy of humans, and so they sort of like are bringing down those barriers. But even in those situations, right, we built countries and alliances, and all of these countries and alliances are creating environments in which you are almost entirely safe, right? There are more safer countries than others,
Yeah.
but in general, Western world, you have a very high degree of safety in the sense that you don't really have to worry about on a day-to-day basis that you're going to get mugged, or you go into a store and somebody's going to steal your wallet or rip you off of your money, or because we have laws and we have accountability and we have all of that elements in human life and human reality that makes all of that possible, right? And because of and we rely, kind of like we defer all that responsibility to the real world service providers, right?
Yes.
The governments, the police, the firefighters, the lawmakers, all of that responsibility is really on them to provide this safe environment and maintain it so that we can operate there without a problem, without a lot of worry, right? We just call and say, oh, I have a problem, fix it. And so I don't think it's unnatural, right, to have the same expectation in cyberspace. So humans exist with that same expectation in cyberspace. And it's very difficult to change. Or probably impossible to change, because you cannot become from a predator existing in security, become a rabbit, right? Which, or an antelope, right? Like a different type of entity being. We need that security, and we need that security in cyberspace more than ever, because cyberspace is evolving to becoming part of our reality. It's no longer that internet where you just go and browse a book and search Wikipedia and information and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Rather, you have internet facilities that control nuclear power plants, right? Or a pacemaker in your heart, or an entire hospitals and everybody, all the beds in the hospital, right? Like cyberspace is becoming integrated into our reality, and so it has to become as safe as our reality. And that's my expectation, and that's what I'd like to do with Identity Plus, in creating that likeness between reality and digital space.
And I like this because this is a very positive approach towards the near future. Because if it's integrating, cyberspace integrating in our normal lives, and we have a certain human behavior that we tend to step into the safe environments, either it's reality or it is cyberspace, and Identity Plus can play a role in this positive approach of protecting yourself in an emerging world where cyberspace and reality is emerging. Yeah.
Right.
All right. You mentioned it already, the AI revolution. That is the next step within our acceptance of human beings, but also mostly in cybersecurity. So first, about the positive aspects of AI. I think this is aligned with the idea of Identity Plus. First, the positive aspects of AI. What do you think?
So I guess like every leap in technology, AI is making everything so much more effective, and I think that's wonderful. I mean, if you look at everything that is happening around us, transportation, electricity, like everything is so much more effective than it was 100 years ago or 200 years ago, right? And so AI is taking yet another huge step forward into making all of these so much more effective. And so that's very positive. And I think that's an important element, and it's not like unexpected that the entire industry is so excited about it, right? Because we have so many things to do, and so much to achieve, right? So AI
many
can help us do
initiatives.
that.
Yeah. All right.
But
That's the
it's
positive side.
yes, but the problem is that with every technology, it's disruptive, right? And it's with respect to cybersecurity, it's tremendously disruptive because we are not ready. Like I said, I mean, we had like cybersecurity missed several of these iterations, like several of these big leaps forward.
Yes.
It never grew into compensating or creating the safety framework for those environments to actually operate normally, right? And so now AI is becoming yet another one, which it's a huge one because it's a purely digital element, right? All of these other ones had sort of like reality elements as well, right? Like the mobile revolution, it's like
Yes.
physical reality a little bit into the digital space. But AI is kind of like a purely digital, like it will suck in even more things from real world into the digital space, making it digital for processing, like, and all of this. And it will just make reality even more dependent on this digital space for which cybersecurity is not ready. And I mean, I think I like to compare AI, like it's not positive or negative for cybersecurity, right? Because AI is just a technology, like any other technology, like nuclear technology, right? Like nuclear technology is not good or bad in itself. It can be used for good, right? It can generate electricity like no other, I mean, in volumes that like no other mechanism can in the world.
Yeah.
But it can also be used to create atomic bombs. And so that's exactly what's happening in the AI arena as well. You can use AI to make your cybersecurity processes more effective,
Yes.
but then AI can be used by bad actors to make their processes more effective. And it's really a factor. If your outdated cybersecurity processes get 10 times better, it cannot compensate for the advanced attacker capabilities becoming 10 times better, right? Because if 10 times 10 is 100, 100 times the 10 is 1,000. So it just amplifies the chasm between what we already have and what they have or they will have. And that's a problem. And I think if we don't consider and we don't take this seriously in the sense of actually going back to the drawing board and rethinking how the architecture of cyberspace is, and it's not going to be easy, this is going to be kind of like that singularity that everybody's talking about, but it's a very negative singularity.
All right. So there's still a negative singularity. I did not expect anything else from a cybersecurity expert like
Well,
yourself.
think about it like this, right? We invest every year billions of dollars into cybersecurity, right?
Yes.
I think it was 200 billion in 2024, something like that. I may be mistaken. The cost of cybercrime was 10 trillion. The year before, it was half the. So in 2023, we invested about half that money, right? Like 100 billion. The cost of cybercrime was 5 trillion, right? Next year is expected to be 20 trillion, and so on. But if you look at these charts,
Yeah.
the industry, the internet industry in itself, as an industry, has also a value. It's about 30 something trillion dollars, the entire industry. At some point in time, when cybercrime will start crossing that value,
Yeah.
that's definitely becoming a singularity, because if everything we do in the internet and all the value that the internet is bringing is basically canceled out by some other factor also happening in the internet or through the internet,
Yeah.
then that's a singularity.
Yeah. I see what you
It's
mean. But
it's no longer
this is
worth it.
no, it's unsustainable.
Yes.
as soon as it's going to cross, what are we going to do next?
Exactly.
Oh, wild idea. Wild idea.
And we're getting there. I mean, if you look at the trends are not changing every single year. There hasn't been a single year where the cost of cybercrime hasn't jumped significantly compared to the cost of what we invest. And the problem here is, it's not that we don't invest. There's actually tremendous amount of attention in cybersecurity today. Like you said, regulatory requirements are sometimes crippling companies into implementing such an arsenal of processes that it almost becomes sometimes bigger than the business itself, right? And so there's attention there. Companies are buying cybersecurity products. I mean, there's a specific bank that I was reading about. I'm not going to tell its name, but they're willing to put $1 billion in cybersecurity per year. That's insane amount of money. Yeah. It doesn't matter because they got breached, and that's what's happening. It doesn't matter how much money and effort you throw at cybersecurity. There's nothing you can buy to protect you.
It almost sounds as a law of nature. It's inevitable. So we just have to accept. We have to accept our fate, Stefan.
No. I disagree. Just like with reality, we don't accept our fate, right? We do something about it. Yeah. That's. I mean, I think accepting our fate is actually what's happening with cybersecurity. That's one of my like big beefs with cybersecurity, if you will. That sort of it's an industry that became complacent, right? In like a while back, like it was Robert Mueller, the FBI, the former director of the FBI, who said that there are only two types of companies: those that have been breached and those that will be breached. Yeah. That coming from a director of a security agency that is responsible for the safety of an entire nation.
Yes,
it's almost ridiculous. I mean, do you even hear yourself? It's like saying there are only two types of people: those that have been killed, and those that will be killed. Right? There's no natural death anymore in the world. No. There's like, you will be killed. It doesn't matter. You should not worry about it. and the cybersecurity industry embraced that philosophy, right? Because it sort of like exonerates them in a sense of responsibility.
Is this a reason why there are not big leaps forwards in the cybersecurity space? Because if this is already the idea that's living now, it's inevitable. You either be braced or be killed, or you are killed or be killed. Cybersecurity companies can easily say, right, yeah, well, we did our best, but that's it, guys. There's no responsibility. And then we go back to the accountability you just mentioned. You know, how many of the big security players say, we serve the Fortune 500, all of them. Yes. But those companies are still being breached.
Yes. And so I guess this is a very big and wider philosophical thing, but I think it has to do with how corporates operate, unfortunately. And for corporates, it's really the bottom line that matters, right? It really, nothing else really matters. A lot of companies will happily sell you things that are bad for you, as long as they make money. And that's exactly the same in digital space as well. It's nothing different. Things will change when things will become so pressing and so critical that it will have to be a change. And I think it's the responsibility of people to put more pressure on SaaS providers into protecting their security. And then there's the responsibility of all of these SaaS or internet operating service providers, of putting more pressure onto cybersecurity companies to actually deliver what is promised, right? Because there's a tremendous amount of cybersecurity offerings out there promising all sorts of things that don't really deliver, or deliver partially, right? And it's just not enough. And I think we need to step up. And I think you have to just ask for it, demand it, just like we demand it everywhere else. And I think it's going to come. I don't think it's going to get to the point when the internet is not going to become feasible anymore. I think the people will revolt a lot earlier than that.
All right, then it is a nice step towards you as an entrepreneur in the cybersecurity space. The demand for accountability. You already mentioned the idea of Identity Plus came from a disappointment during an event you attended. Now to Identity Plus, where you can combine accountability and parameter security. Can you tell something about your idea of your journey as an entrepreneur in this space? Because eventually the demand will come to you as well, the demand for accountability of the offering. But first thing first, what did you do as an entrepreneur for the past years?
Working. So yes, I think there's two fundamental aspects to entrepreneurship, at least in this space. Cybersecurity really needs a technological revolution. So we need to change a lot of things. But it's not only the revolution is not only technological. I think the revolution is also kind of like the dynamics. So we're not bringing in new technologies. We're also bringing in new ways of using technology. Just like the mobile revolution, yes, it involved a mobile device, which kind of like catalyzed the mobile revolution. But then it was the way we started using things that was actually the revolution itself, right? And the same thing is the cloud. AWS kind of like was the first real cloud, and it started offering that technology, the virtualization and whatnot. But virtualization existed beforehand, and it wasn't a revolution. The revolution became when AWS offered that, and then people started using it. So it was the change in dynamics that created that. And I think that needs to change here as well with respect to cybersecurity of how we start using technology. So we deliver the technology and how we start using the technology. And for us as a cybersecurity startup, basically, we have basically two jobs. One, creating the technology, right? The what will change the revolution, and then also creating the awareness around that technology and creating the momentum that will kind of like help people consume the ways and they can use that technology to become safer themselves. Because right now, all that complacent nature of cybersecurity created a fundamental apathy on the industry side, the rest of the industry, right? I mean, they kind of like have a resentment about it, like or not resentment, resentment as well, but they're kind of like accepting their fate, so to speak, that it doesn't really matter what I buy. And so they don't really bother buying a lot of things. You see a lot of startups not worrying about security like at all until they hit that threshold where like regulatory requirements start pressing on them, right? So they really just do things because they must, not because they are aware of it, and they no longer ask for it either. So they like just postpone it, right? Just not care about it. And all of that needs to change. And for that, we need awareness. We need awareness for people to understand that this is not necessarily the way things have to be. We can change this, which is difficult because cybersecurity is a very noisy environment. There are a lot of things happening.
Yes.
Obviously, because of the regulatory environments, because of the constant threats, because of constant attacks, because of the constant breaches, because of the everything that happens to you on a daily basis, right? Even something as small as the spam in your inbox, right? The phishing emails in your inbox, like all of these creating just an uncomfortable environment for you, which at this point in time people are mostly blocking because there's nothing to do about it. There's nothing to help with on the market.
Yeah. That's what I see. What is your target area? What are your target personas for the offering you do?
So I think we look at Identity Plus in a multi-phased environment. So ironically, Identity Plus started as an open initiative, right? Like the way I envisioned changing the world is basically, instead of trying to figure out who the bad guy is and block them and bad guy, we're talking about devices on the internet, because there's right, those are the bad act, like the instruments of bad acting. To create an environment where legitimate people have the capability of cooperating into kind of like endorsing each other, right? Mm-hmm. And saying that this is the pool of legitimate devices, civil devices, and we can block everything else.
Yes.
Right? And everything else means the bad guys as well. They're just in the noise, right? And we can do that with mutual TLS. That's actually a very strong capability that exists ever since the 1990s. That essentially demands authentication of the connecting device before the device connects, or basically in the step of the connection.
Yeah.
Which means that if the device doesn't authenticate, you as a service provider have the power to not interact with it, right? You don't know the device, you don't interact with it. And if you don't interact with it, then that kind of like slashes your surface of attack by 99.59%. So that is just like a tremendous amount of protection, right? It creates a safe environment. That tiny fraction is basically attacks coming from known devices.
Yeah.
Or friendly devices, so to speak, right? And even those attacks coming from friendly devices is an accountable device. So you detected an attack, maybe that attack wasn't intentional, maybe it was hijacked, maybe it was just a runaway process, maybe there can be any number of reasons. But the idea is that if you detected that, that's actionable. You can take an action against or with that person or entity that is causing that what's happening, right? And that would create a tremendously different internet where essentially civil people interact to create a reputation score anonymously for other civil people in such a way as we can interact even in a way that we don't know each other, for example, but you know my reputation. And if I'm doing something bad, then you can kind of like report me, and then that reputation will follow me everywhere, even if it doesn't bear my name, right? And that's possible in digital space because you're not in digital space. It's your device that's in digital space. And so you can do that without actually violating people's privacy. In fact, you can do that in a way that it protects people's privacy, right? Yeah. But this is very big leap. And so we started that. I actually contacted OWASP back then and the Linux Foundation, and they didn't really see any ways to support that, or it wasn't appealing to them. And probably it was not appealing because it has operational aspects, and these foundations are not really set up to do that. No. And so I decided to make it a business and take it a little, like break it up in smaller steps, right? And we broke up the industry in two types of industry. We call it finite tenant systems and infinite tenant systems. And the finite tenant systems are those where you know the user ahead of time, ahead of the interaction, yes. Right? There's a lot of businesses or a lot of business use cases that fall into that situation. For example, a B2B integration with a partner service, or employees in a company, or like a lot of situations, right? They fall into the finite tenant systems. An infinite tenant system on the other side would be something like an online shopping center, right? Like Amazon, not AWS, Amazon, right? You go in occasionally. You don't even have to have a username. You browse through things. Maybe you create a username. You buy something, then you don't visit for a very long time because you visit other online shops. So that's an infinite tenant system. Infinite tenant systems require that network effect to be in place. Finite tenant systems, on the other hand, they don't, because you have the power to actually give client certificates to your finite, to your known people already, right? And so we broke that up into these two industries, and so focusing on the finite tenant systems predominantly right now, and just building momentum there. And of those finite tenant systems, we're focusing again on the highly regulated environments, kind of like fintech, health tech, defense tech, because there's tremendous amount of pressure on those companies from regulatory bodies to creating safe environments. It costs them a lot of money to compensate for losses if those losses happen, kind of like the attacks. The consequences of the attacks are very high. And so they have the incentive of actually maybe trying new things. And so that's kind of like our niche of focus right now. B2B integrations in these finite tenant systems, especially. Because I think what's important to note is that MTLS is used in many places, but it's used in niche places, kind of like local ones. Like, for example, service meshes sometimes deliver MTLS, and there are other use cases. The problem with those is that they are very localized. They're localized to an environment where they're deployed. They cannot port it out from that environment into interacting with third parties, for example.
Yeah.
And so that's where we come in. Basically, we can do that in an open system because that's how Identity Plus was built in an open environment.
So that means the promise is huge. The implications for a network of the deployment are relatively small compared to the outcomes, to the positive results. You decided from an open initiative, contacting organizations like OS, then you decided to build your own business. May I ask, what are during that path? Did you encounter some challenges? And I'm sure you have.
All the time, on a daily basis, right? I mean,
On a daily basis. Can you just elaborate a little bit on some challenges you need to overcome and your idea about building this kind of business?
So I guess obviously besides the technological challenge that's in place and which requires innovation and development and all of that, I would consider that the smaller challenge. So I think the bigger challenge is adoption, right? And adoption is a bigger challenge because people have inertia. The industry has a tremendous amount of inertia, right? Yes. And for a good reason. So I don't have a resentment about that. I totally understand that when something needs to be changed in an environment, you never really start from a greenfield environment, right? Everybody already has something. And it's difficult because you have an investment to make, and that investment is not only financial, because obviously you are investing kind of like the trust in that building block to put it into your environment in such a way as to then you can rely on it, right? When you put a brick in your house, you really want to make sure that that brick is solid because you want to live in that house for the next 50 years, right? Yeah. And so it's very, very difficult to then take out that brick and put another one in place of it because that's just how things are. So I guess the difficulty and the challenge is into taking that technology, which is revolutionary in itself, and kind of like honing it into such a form that is applicable in bits and pieces into today's technology. And so it's compatible with today's technology in ways that it's consumable in such a way that it doesn't create a huge risk on the company. It gives them the possibility to try it in little spaces, then gradually migrate onto it, be compatible with everything that they already have, with integrations with third parties, not only technology, but also ways of working, right?
But you're solving some issues already. You're thinking about the process from a customer side, from a user adoption.
Yes.
What were the implications for you as a person, as a founder, as an entrepreneur? Because you needed to overcome, and it seems, if you just explain it to me, it seems so logical, sounds so logical. But you needed to overcome these kind of.
Yes, I guess. I guess it's natural. I would say that should be natural for every entrepreneur or scientist, right? Until they figure out how to change the status quo, right? Yeah. The status quo is very, very strong. And in order to change it, you really need to kind of like adapt your technology in a way that it actually fits first and then changes second, right? Yeah. Rather than just come in and disrupts. Because and I never really liked the term disruption. I know Silicon Valley is infatuated with the disruption terminology, but I personally don't like the disruption terminology. No. I think that technology needs to be kind of like the revolutionizing things, like transformational, changing things for the better rather than disrupting things. Yeah. So I think that's what's very important from a technology perspective, and that's what's very, very, very difficult from an architectural and development perspective into actually creating those kind of like that smooth transition into it, because there are a lot of technologies out there that are great, but as long as if you don't create that smooth transition, it's very difficult to adopt and make it useful, right?
Yes.
I think about IPv6. It's not only useful technology, it's an absolutely necessary technology, because we ran out of IP space in IPv4, and still it's been available for so long, and it's the differences are not that big. They're significant, but not that big, and still it's very, very difficult to change things from where we were, or where we are, I would say, in IPv4 space to IPv6.
So this is something you learned as an entrepreneur. You see comparable trends. So IPv6 comparison came up also with your business. May I ask what are the triumphs, the things you were very happy about running Identity Plus? I can imagine, for example, that when you made the decision to start an actual business, was a first triumph. And during the past couple of years, what made you excited about being an entrepreneur?
So I can't say I'm first of all, I'm very excited about the possibility of change, right? I mean, that's what keeps me going, because up to this point, I can't say we had a fundamental breakthrough, right? In which now everybody's using Identity Plus and it's making their lives easier. That didn't happen until now, or as of yet. It's a better word. But I think every single little step was kind of like a sense of achievement, right? When we figured out that we can actually, for example, create that identity barrier in the technology space, and the tools are already there and present in the technology. I mean, your browser is MTLS compatible, right? You probably didn't know about that, but it is. And almost everything on the internet is MTLS compatible, yet MTLS is used less than 1% of the use cases, because it's very difficult to use. But like that realization was a triumph, right?
Yeah.
When we created something that we made it easy for those client certificates to be put into the people's devices, that was an achievement, a triumphant sensation, right?
Yeah.
Sentiment. Every time we make it easier for people to consume, it's a triumph. Or every time you come and a customer, for example, or a design partner at this early stage is really saying that Identity Plus makes my life so much easier, it's a triumph. It's a small one, but it's very, very important.
I fully agree. I fully agree. It's so important also to celebrate the small steps.
And the negatives one, I mean, you also learn from those. I mean, you realize that some things don't work, and then it kind of like pushes you towards finding a solution. And then when you find that solution, it is a triumph. Yeah. So we turn everything right. I mean, we keep our the positive thoughts keep us going.
That sounds good. Where do you want to be in 3 years from now with the company?
So obviously in a better place, and hopefully we'll be in a better place in the sense of having more customers, having more feedback, having a little bit of growth behind us, having that reassurance that we're going into the right direction. Right, we have a lot of Identity Plus. I mean, there's a lot of, in the beginning it started as a hypothesis, right? Yes. But then it kind of like, with every achievement that we went through, every little triumph that I mentioned earlier, essentially it became more obvious that hypothesis is actually there were confirmations for that hypothesis, right? And I think one of the biggest confirmations was the AI. I mean, Identity Plus was started prior to this AI happening, yes. Right? Like what's happening in AI, especially agentic AI. And what's interesting about agentic AI is that agentic AI really has an identity crisis, because it doesn't. I mean, identity as it is created right now, and maybe that's a topic for another conversation because it's a long one. Identity-oriented architecture versus credential-oriented architecture, where we live in right now. We're living in credential world. So those credential identities are not suitable for AI. AI cannot work with it. It obfuscates. It creates an obfuscation layer, which is creating a tremendous amount of complexity, and that complexity in turn is creating a tremendous amount of cybersecurity issues. Cybersecurity issues in the sense that opportunities for criminals to exploit things, right? So it's very simple. Crime is crime.
Yeah.
And so the biggest confirmation was for Identity Plus was that the architectural model of Identity Plus, which is a fundamentally identity-oriented architecture as opposed to credential-oriented architecture, it's very much suitable for AI. So it's almost like it was almost like I don't know, in science at least there's it's this principle that good science is the science that has the capability to predict, right? If you think about Einstein's general relativity, Einstein was long gone, and we're still, I mean, his predictions are coming true with measurements and experiments that are done today and were not possible back then.
It still are. Still,
yes,
we are working on this hypothesis, and it is still predicting true. It is being proven,
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And so when you have in that situation that you create a hypothesis and you build an environment and a framework that actually happens to fit like a glove to a revolution that hasn't been there when you developed it, I mean, that is a very, very strong confirmation that you're heading into the right direction, right?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, adoption is going to be kind of like the next level of big confirmation. So would like in 3 years to be more in that, having that confirmation kind of like behind us.
Yeah.
And just focusing on improving and making it better.
Very good, Stefan. Yeah, Stefan, I think you're full of metaphors, and I like you're this kind of topics are very hard to understand for people outside of a business. But if you make it easy, like you're doing during the conversation, you tend to see it in front of you, see all the little steps, and you can also easily remember all the topics we just touched. Stefan, I really enjoyed the conversation about your view about cybersecurity, about Identity Plus, and you're also founder of the company. You already took it away, but you mentioned some other topics we can just talk about in other podcast episodes. But I would like to thank you all for your appearance on Encrypted Minds, and thank you for attending.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
it was
you're
a
welcome.
pleasure.
Thank you so much, Stefan. Bye.
Bye.